Nobody warned me about the map, not the financial one, the other map. The picture of retirement you have been carrying inside you for decades without ever asking where it came from or whether it actually fits you. I spent 36 years keeping industrial machinery running. I knew how to diagnose what was wrong with a machine. I had no idea I had been living inside someone else's blueprint. My name is Mike. Come with me through this. I almost retired the wrong way, not financially. I want to be clear about that because that is not what this channel is about. The other way. The way that is quieter and harder to name and that nobody who has been through it talks about enough. It was a Tuesday morning in late October, about 3 weeks after the buyout. I was standing in the kitchen at 8 in the morning with a cup of coffee, and the house was completely still. And I had nowhere to be for the first time in 36 years. No shift, no line waiting on me, no 2 a.m. call that might or might not come. Nothing. And I want to describe this moment carefully because the way I'm about to describe it is not the way I expected to describe it. And the gap between those two descriptions is what this whole video is about. I expected to feel relief. I expected to feel the particular exhale of a man who has been carrying weight for a long time and has finally been allowed to set it down. I expected something that felt like arrival, like stepping through a door I had been walking toward for years and finding on the other side exactly what I had imagined. Quiet, unhurried, mine. What I felt was closer to the sensation of reaching into your coat pocket for something you have been keeping there for months, something you know is there and finding the pocket empty. Not emergency, not crisis, just a specific absence where something familiar was supposed to be. I stood in that kitchen for a while. I drank the coffee. I looked out the window at the garage where the Mustang was waiting. 11 years of a project that retirement was finally going to give me real time for. I thought, okay, go work on the car. So I did, and the car was good. The car was everything I needed it to be. But even then, even in those first weeks when I was in the garage by 7 every morning, working on something that was entirely mine, on my own schedule, at my own pace, even then I had this low background feeling that I could not name. Like I had been handed a map to a place and arrived to find the map was for a different place entirely. I did not know yet that the map had a name. I did not know yet that I had been carrying someone else's picture of retirement inside me for so long it had started to feel like my own. I did not know yet that the thing I was feeling in that kitchen on that Tuesday morning was not a problem with me, and it was not a problem with retirement, and it was not ingratitude, and it was not weakness. It was the specific disorientation of a man who had been handed a dream that was never really designed for him. That is what this video is about. How many of you have felt that? Not the dramatic version, not crisis, not breakdown. The quiet version. The version where you are standing somewhere you always said you wanted to be, and you feel something underneath the gratitude that you cannot quite name. Something that asks a question you are not sure you know how to answer. The version where the coffee is hot and the morning is yours, and you are free in every technical sense of the word, and yet something is not sitting right. How many of you have told yourself that the feeling would pass? How many of you have decided it was adjustment, that you just needed more time, that you needed to get the schedule figured out or the projects lined up or the calendar filled in a certain way, and then it would feel like what you were promised? How many of you have looked at the version of retirement that the culture has been selling you your entire life? The couple on the beach, the endless golf rounds, the grandchildren at the lake house, and felt somewhere beneath the recognition a kind of quiet unease, like you were being shown a picture of a life that was vaguely the shape of yours, but not exactly yours, like the face in the photo was almost you, but not quite. That feeling is not ingratitude. That feeling is information. Here is the thing I want to say clearly before I go any further, because it took me 2 years to say it out loud. The retirement dream is real. I am not standing here in this garage telling you that what you worked for was an illusion. The time is real. The freedom is real. The Mustang behind me is real in the most literal sense. I have been working on it for 11 years, and it is 90% done, and it is the best thing in my mornings. What I am saying is that the dream most of us were handed, the specific picture, the specific shape of it, the specific promises inside it, that dream was never designed by you. You inherited it. You carried it for decades. And when you arrived, you found out it did not fit the way you expected. What I am about to share took me 2 years to see clearly. But once I saw it, I could not unsee it. And I think if you are in the middle of this right now, or heading toward it, or watching from the outside trying to understand what happened to someone you know, what comes next is going to land somewhere real. Come with me through this. I want to start with where the dream came from. Not abstractly, specifically, because I know exactly where mine came from. And when I finally looked at it honestly, I realized I had been living inside someone else's picture for so long, I had stopped noticing it was not mine. My father worked at a plant in Rockford for 31 years. Different plant, same industrial corridor where I eventually ended up. He retired at 63. I was 21. And I watched what happened after he retired the way a kid watches the adults in his life do things. Not analytically, just absorbing. Filing it away as information about how the world works. What I watched was this. My father came home from his last day. There was a small thing at the plant, not a big deal. He was not a ceremony kind of man. He came home, he sat in the recliner, he watched the news, he went to bed. And the next day he got up and he sat in the recliner and he watched the news and he went to bed. And that was more or less the shape of his retirement for several years. I do not say this to criticize him. He worked hard in conditions that were harder than mine. He earned the recliner. What I am saying is that the picture I absorbed as a kid, the picture that settled into me as the template for what retirement was a man in a chair. The job done. You sit. The urgency is over. You rest. That was the dream as I understood it, not because anyone designed it that way, not because I chose it consciously, but because I watched a man I respected live it, and somewhere in my young brain I filed it under, that is what comes after. I carried that picture for 38 years without examining it once, without asking whether it was mine, without asking whether the man in the recliner was actually at peace or was simply too tired to be restless. The dream I inherited said, freedom means absence of obligation. It said, when the job ends, you rest. It said, the reward for a long working life is the removal of the urgency that organized the working life. Rest, sit, you have earned it. And the problem, the specific, quiet, hard-to-name problem I ran into 3 weeks after the buyout, was that 36 years of urgency does not just stop because someone hands you a check. The machine keeps running. The engine is still on. You have removed the load from it, but the engine is still turning over, and it does not know what to do with itself, and neither do you. I did not understand this until Phil explained it to me. Phil is my neighbor. Retired electrician, 3 years ahead of me in this. He is the most useful person in my retirement, which is a sentence I would not have expected to say, but it is true. I went over to his house for coffee about 6 weeks after I was out, and I was in the early weeks of the garage phase, working on the Mustang every morning, genuinely happy, actually feeling something close to the arrival I had expected. And I told him that. I told him I thought I had figured it out. The garage was the answer. The project was the answer. This was what the whole thing had been waiting for. Phil drank his coffee. He looked at me the way a man looks at someone who is about to make a mistake he already made. He said, "How long do you think the garage is going to carry you?" I did not know what to say to that. He said, "The garage is real. The project is real." I had my thing too. You know what mine was, and it was real, and it helped. But there is going to come a day when the project stops and you have a day with nothing specific in it. And I want you to know that day is coming so that when it arrives, you are not surprised by what it feels like. I told him I was sure I would be fine. I was in the garage every day. I had a project. I had structure. He nodded. He drank his coffee. He said, "Yeah, that is what I said." He was right. Month 6. The Mustang hit a stage that required waiting, parts on order, a repair I needed to assess before proceeding. First day in 5 months when I did not have something specific to do in the garage. I got up at 6:30 the way I always did, made the coffee, looked at the garage. There was nothing to go in for, not in the productive sense, not that morning. So I sat at the kitchen table, and I sat there, and I sat there some more. And what I felt in that kitchen at 9 in the morning was something I had been warned about and had not believed the warning. Not boredom exactly, closer to the vertigo you get when the ground is not where your foot expected it. Like a gear shifting and finding nothing to engage. The machine still running, nothing for it to run against. That day was the first time retirement felt like what I had been warned it might feel like. Empty in a particular way that the garage had been keeping at bay without my knowing it. And what I understood, not right away, it took me a few days of sitting with it, was that Phil had not been warning me about boredom. He had been warning me about the moment when the dream runs out of content. Because the dream I had inherited, the one my father demonstrated, the one the culture had been selling me for decades, that dream had a shape but no weight. It had a picture but no substance. It said rest. It said you are done. It said the absence of urgency is the thing you have been working toward. And the absence of urgency is real, and it is part of it. I am not saying it is not. But a man who has spent 36 years organized entirely around urgency does not transform into a man who can simply be. Not without some work. Not without finding out what he actually is when the urgency is not running the show. The dream does not tell you that part. The dream just hands you the time and assumes you know what to do with it. What I started to understand sitting at that kitchen table on that day in month 6 was that the problem was not retirement. The problem was that I had arrived at retirement carrying someone else's map, and the map did not match the terrain. And I had not noticed because for 5 months the garage had been covering the gap. The garage was mine. The Mustang was mine. But the larger picture of what retirement was supposed to be, rest, absence, the end of urgency, that was inherited. That was not designed by me. I had never once sat down and asked, what does a retirement that is actually mine look like? That question turned out to be a lot harder to answer than I expected. I want to tell you about the VOTEC, the vocational technical program at a high school a few miles from my house. Basic mechanical and electrical troubleshooting for juniors and seniors heading into the trades. I am there one morning a week, have been for 14 months. The way I got there is the most honest example I have of what I mean when I say the real retirement is the one that finds you, not the one you inherit. A teacher called on a recommendation from someone I barely know, 8 months in. I said yes, mostly because I could not think of a reason to say no. Drove over on a Thursday morning expecting to spend an hour and come home. Walked into a shop classroom, machine oil, pegboards with the tools outlined in marker, the sound of a fluorescent light with a bad ballast, and felt something shift. Not nostalgia, something more active, like a machine starting up that had been sitting quiet. I sat down with 17-year-olds trying to learn how to read an electrical schematic and showed them the way I used to show the young guys at the plant. Not by lecturing, by asking, what do you see? What would you check first? The questions they asked me back were the same questions the young guys always asked, because a bad circuit is a bad circuit and the logic for finding it has not changed. I drove home and sat in the driveway a while before I went inside. trying to understand what had just happened, not dramatically, diagnostically. What I eventually landed on was this. For 8 months, I had been doing things that were mine: the garage, the channel, the mornings, good things, real things. But all of them were mine in a closed-circuit sense. The loop closed within me. The Votech was different. Something I had learned over 36 years was landing in a 17-year-old who was going to take it into the world and use it on machines I would never see. It was usefulness that extended beyond my own mornings. I had not known I needed that. The dream did not have a word for it. The part of me that had been a crew lead for 24 years, that had trained younger technicians for 12 years, that had been called at 2 a.m. because someone trusted my judgment, that part had not retired. I had not given it anywhere to go. I have been going back every Thursday since. I still do not fully understand why it matters as much as it does. I know it the way I know when a machine is running right. Not because I can explain it precisely, but because I have been listening long enough to recognize the sound. Here is what I want to say about that, because this is the thing that the dream gets most wrong. The dream promises you freedom from usefulness. It says you have been useful long enough. The job is done. Now do whatever you want. And that sounds good. That sounds like relief. But what nobody tells you, what I had to learn the hard way, sitting at a kitchen table on a gray day in month 6, is that the desire to matter does not retire when you do. The hunger for your skills to land somewhere that counts, the need to have your knowledge extend into the world in some form, that does not end at 60. It does not end at 62. It changes shape, it changes context, it finds different containers, but it does not end. And if you build a retirement that does not account for it, the retirement will feel hollow in ways you will not be able to explain, because the dream never told you this was a thing you were supposed to plan for. Phil knew this. He had told me in the early months, not in these words, but in the same direction. He said, the projects help, but they are not enough by themselves. You need something that has weight outside your own head. I did not know what he meant then. I know now. That is what the dream leaves out. It gives you the time. It gives you the freedom. The image of a life organized around your own preferences. And all of that is real, and all of it matters. But it does not tell you that the man who walks out the door on the last day is still a man who needs to be useful to something, still a man who needs his competence to extend into the world in some form, still a man who will feel the hunger if he goes too long without that extension. The dream does not have a word for that hunger. The dream calls it rest. It is not rest. It is a different kind of need. And until you name it, you will spend years trying to fill it with things that are adjacent to it, but not quite it. Until something, a phone call, a neighbor's honest warning, a classroom that smells like machine oil, shows you what you were actually looking for. I want to stop here for a moment, because what I am about to say is the thing that took me the longest to see, and I do not want to rush it. The retirement dream is not a lie. I want to be careful about that. The time is real. The mornings are real. The garage is real. The coffee without a meeting at the end of it is real, and it is good, and I do not take it for granted. What I am saying is something more specific than that the dream is false. The dream is inherited. You did not design it. You absorbed it. You watched your father in the recliner, and you absorbed what retirement was. You watched the advertisements, the couple on the beach, walking somewhere scenic, looking at each other with the soft focus of people freed from all obligation. And you absorbed the shape of it. You heard the phrases so long they became wallpaper. The golden years. You have earned it. All of that language built a picture inside you that you had been walking toward for years without ever examining whether it was actually yours. And then you arrived. And the picture did not quite fit. And you did not know why. And you told yourself it was adjustment. and you looked for the beach and the soft focus and found instead a Tuesday morning at 8 with a cup of coffee and a still house and something underneath the quiet that you could not name. That feeling is not failure. That feeling is the moment the inherited dream runs out and your actual life begins. That is what nobody tells you. I want you to sit with that for a second. The moment the inherited dream runs out, and it will run out if it has not already, is not a crisis. It is the beginning of the actual work. The work of finding out what retirement looks like when you stop living inside someone else's picture and start asking what the real one is. And that work is harder than the job was in some ways. The job had external structures. Someone told you when you were needed and what was broken and what the standard was. This work has no external structures. Nobody calls you at 2 a.m. to tell you what needs fixing. You have to learn to hear the machine yourself. I have been doing this work for 2 years. I am not finished. What I can tell you is that the retirement I am building now, the one with the garage and the mornings and Phil and the Votech kids and this channel, looks almost nothing like the picture I inherited. And it fits, not because it is perfect, because it is mine. The dream was the waiting. The retirement is the finding out what you were actually waiting for. 7 years from now, if you ask me what I did with my retirement, I will not tell you about the beach. I will tell you about a Thursday morning when a kid asked me why the meter was reading wrong, and I asked him what he saw first and watched him figure it out. I will tell you about Phil over coffee telling me the mistake I was about to make and making it anyway. I will tell you about the Mustang in October when the light comes through the garage door and the bodywork is exactly right, and nobody anywhere needed it to be right except me. That is not the dream I inherited. That is the retirement I found. The best thing I can tell you is this. If you have already felt the moment when the map stopped matching the terrain, you are not lost. You are just in the part that the dream never described. And that part is worth finding. If you have a partner, a wife, a husband, someone who is close enough to your life to see it clearly, ask them something this week. Not what you said you wanted from retirement. Ask them what they think you actually want, what they have seen in you in the moments when you were most yourself. Karen knew what I was looking for before I did. She usually does. The people closest to us carry observations about us that we are too inside our own heads to have. Ask. If you know someone, a friend, a brother, a neighbor, who just retired and has that look, the look of a man whose map turned out to be for a different place, send them this. One person. You know who it is. That is the sentence this whole video comes down to. The retirement dream is real. It is just not yours yet. If what you heard today matched something you have been carrying and not knowing how to name, I would like for you to subscribe, not as a transaction. Because the people in the comments here are having some of the most honest conversations I have come across about what this transition actually is, and that is worth continuing. Hit the bell so you see the next one, and in the comments, write the name of someone you know who is navigating this right now and needs to hear it, or just write that you know that person. That is enough. I read every one. Take care of yourselves out there. The map you inherited is not the only map there is.